The doors are open. Why don't you walk on in? It's time for another episode of the Thought Buffet. This is the culinary portion of this, web series of events that I have going on. That doesn't examine food, it doesn't examine drink. Instead, it examines the mind, the culture, everything that we are going through in today's society, today's world. And we sometimes look at it from a very unique perspective. Today what I want to talk to you guys about is the concept of suicide. Now, the idea of suicide is something that is extremely simple to understand. It's whenever a person, or in the cases of group suicides or cult suicides, a group of people decide to take their own life through a variety of different ways. Well, they can't do it with a variety of ways. They can only use one that's actually effective, but a variety of different methods are implemented. I speak specifically about this topic today considering I just recently underwent a very heavy personal loss within my family. And the reason for this was because of suicide. Now, I don't want to get too deep into details considering those are, private to the family. However, there is something that I can say about suicide that a lot of people may not really agree with, and that's the fact that sometimes, even though it hurts us, sometimes even though it hurts the people that are closest to them, around them, well, suicide can be relatively justified. Yeah. And that's another thing that I hope to accomplish in this video, is to talk about how the diminished value or the diminished, propensity of suicide has really occurred over the past couple of years because of the internet, because of online sensations that have revolved around suicide, because of bullying, and just overall how the word and how the idea has kind of become demonized because of things that have happened by very few or associated with a very few select people in a group. Now, the justification of suicide for me is it goes simply like this, and that's the fact that in the case of my personal loss, this was an individual that had a variety of health problems, and one of those health problems included the psychological phenomenon of paranoid schizophrenia. And also, there were terminal illnesses that were being battled with as well. However, at the point in time, things seemed to be going as well as could be expected. Up, mobile, and seemingly very happy. Now, unfortunately, this is also an individual that suffered the horrors of a very unpopular war, suffered the horrors of returning home to a country that, instead of supporting him, being on his side, instead returned to a world that belittled him, that spat on him, and underwent a lot of horrors that included, well, all the things that you hear about in the media. Drugs, crime. There were a lot of different things that happened in this gentleman's life. Really, a perfectly good person that was ripped apart by one phenomenon that happened here in America, one event that happened here in America, and his whole entire life became changed because of it. And near the end, as I said, things seemed to be going pretty well, but as was mentioned to me by various different people as I was recovering from this event, that's usually whenever things happen. Because sometimes people just want to die on their terms, especially whenever they're staring death in the face already due to terminal illness, either that or due to a psychological illness that will never be cured and that has debilitated them to the point where it just doesn't seem as though life is worth living anymore. Now, I mentioned earlier in this video that I wanted to talk about how the notion of suicide has changed. And in today's culture and in today's society, suicide has almost become laughable. I know that a lot of you have cruised the internet, probably have Facebook accounts, Tumblrs, whatever it may be. And maybe through a friend of a friend, or maybe through somebody on your own friends list, or just something that had been reposted in a group that you're a participant in, you see something along the lines of the scene I'm about to set for you. Somebody holding either a knife to their throat, or somebody using plain text to say because somebody won't talk to them or date them, go out with them. This is usually somebody younger, but I'm not going to judge that because I'm sure it has happened to people that are 30 or 40 somethings as well. They have a knife to their throat, or they say, "I'm going to kill myself if you don't talk to me. I hope you're happy." Using essentially suicide as a method of guilt-tripping somebody to bend to their whim. A unique form of control that in this day and age has actually caused for more people to say, "Go die," than actually bend. Because we've all already seen the game. We've all already seen how this is played out. We may have even experienced it. And perhaps we have bent before, and nothing has ever happened. Either that, or we have not bent, and nothing has happened. It's all an alarmist way in order to get some sort of attention. But that's not every case. In some cases, it's a legitimate cry for help. In fact, in all cases, in reality, it's a legitimate cry for help, but it's more of a, go see a doctor, go see a shrink, your head isn't right, you're just fucked up. But in other cases, it's a legitimate cry for someone, please, help me out. Help me through this. Unfortunately, the notion of suicide has changed in society because of all of this. It's to the point where the notion, the idea, has become more associative with people of the emo persuasion because of the associations with cutting wrists, self-harming and things of that variety. And also, as I mentioned before, of alarmists that are using it just to try to bend people to do their own way, their own whim. Because of that, suicide isn't really taken as seriously, I believe, in this culture as it used to be, with the lone exception of one notable one that occurred last year, and that was, of course, the tragic suicide of Amanda Todd after the bullying that occurred with her. Now, we already talked about this in a previous thought buffet, so if you want to know my feelings on that, go back and find it. However, it is something that is relevant with this case as well. This is something where this was the legitimate call for help. This was that legitimate cry. It wasn't just for attention. It was truly because, after all of that she had gone through, she truly wanted to die. And she posted a cry for help. She posted it in a YouTube video that was shown alongside obituaries, alongside articles, explaining her death, explaining her struggle. And it makes you wonder just how much is really taken from that. Now, of course, she's been elevated to martyr status because of this, even though that's really kind of unjustified. This is just yet another American tragedy that probably could have been avoided if our, ideals and our thoughts and our processes were not so warped because of the culture that we currently live in. However, in this society where our thoughts and our cultures have been warped, this is exactly what happens. What I like to say, and what I like to really tell the masses, to tell all of you, is the fact that suicide's not a joke. It's definitely not something that you play around with. It's not something that you toy with just to gain a little bit of attention. This is not something that you joke about just because somebody won't talk to you, because somebody won't date you, because a friend of yours is spreading rumors. And this is something where I'm looking specifically toward the youth, who seem to think that just because one negative event happens in their life, that it's no longer worth living. Well, here's a harsh reality check for you. It does get a lot worse, but with a nice sound structure, you should be able to make it through. A lot of people also don't think that psychological help is really all of that much of an aid. Well, I tend to disagree. Talking to somebody really does help. Not to mention, it's something where you are able to get all of your feelings, negative or positive, out there in the air. In their presence, you can do basically whatever. You can cry, you can laugh, you can be evaluated based around every single movement that you do. Sounds scary. It sounds almost like Big Brother's right there in the room with you. But if you have the right person, a person who's truly and actually out there and willing to do whatever, and has your needs and your interests at heart, it can be a rewarding experience that helps you cope with things in the future. However, I must say this. If you're using suicide or the ploy for suicide as a bogus attempt at attention, if you're holding knives or guns to your head, knives to your throat obviously, or wrists, as a way in which to provoke the attention that you're hoping for, just go and do it. You're not going to, but let's be honest here. That isn't funny. So somebody won't talk to you. Who cares? So your best friend is spreading a lie about you. Talk with them. Talk it out. Be rational. I know that there's a lot of you out there that perhaps subscribe to an idea of divinity. We're going to talk about religion probably next on the Thought Buffet, but before then, I must say this. If you subscribe to an object of divinity, if you are a religious individual and you are doing things like this, all I can say is, why aren't you praying? Do you not trust in your God? When does it become your terms because it is to the point where life is no longer worth leading? Is it because somebody won't talk to you? Is it because the person you like won't date you? Or is it because you've gone through close to 6 decades of psychological trauma? I think the decision is relatively clear as to which actually has justification, in which you can almost understand why suicide was an option and why suicide was truly painless. It was finally the great release. Finally, the great sleep that silenced the voices, that silenced the doubts, and all of that buried deep psychological destruction vanished. The Thought Buffet today has offered up a very cold slab of truth. One served with a hearty side dish of, well, reality, true events, current, and one that certainly has a lot of emotional backlash. As we close our doors today, I do hope that you'll come back again, and chow down.